Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so glad you've joined me for part 4 of our story, the final conclusion. And you know what, I just love stories, especially stories when there's so many parts like this, because it's a bit like in England when you have a soap like EastEnders or Coronation Street, and everybody can't wait to find out what's happening next and what's happening next, and it's just so exciting rather than just having a closed book and starting a brand new story again. So I love stories like this because it always keeps you guessing, and I do enjoy stories when we get involved with the characters, and this is just such an exciting story. And I don't know about you, but I'm on the edge of my chair wondering what's going to happen next, because we do know that Fiona has discovered a unique glove that comes all the way from Switzerland that she had personally designed for her husband, and it was one-of-a-kind glove. And the Bigfoot tosses it at her feet, and then she realises that there can be no doubt that the person that started the fire in her house was her husband. Did he really want her dead so much because he was so greedy about the money from the divorce settlement? It's amazing what people will do for money. And so here we are, and it's quite a horrifying revelation for poor Fiona. So let's continue with our story. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's continue with our story. As I stared at the glove that I'd bought Gulliver many years back on a trip to Switzerland, the evidence was undeniable, staring at me blazingly in my face. My husband had been here tonight. I knew he had this address, but he'd never been here before. And it was summer, but he'd worn gloves on this night, probably so that his fingerprints would not be found in the cottage, just as a precautionary measure, although I dare say he hoped that the whole place would go up in an inferno of flames, with me in it. The question was, how on earth did he get into the cottage to start the fire in the first place? I had locked all the doors. I was sure of that. I discovered the downstairs window had been yanked wide open, and a bar bent backwards, using some nifty tool, I expect. My husband must have climbed through the crawl space and got into the cottage this way. Was it in fact him who had been looking at me through the living room window earlier on in the evening, jolting me rudely out of my sleep? When I suspected that someone was out there, it must have been him, I thought. I walked aimlessly around the cottage, my mind an absolute whirl, as I ruminated over that aftermath of what could have potentially happened to me had I not got out of the cottage in time. The couch in the living room was smouldering, a carcass of what it had once been. I decided to check out all the smoke alarms. To my amazement, all the batteries were missing. They had been removed. And it really hit me like a bullet to the side of the head. My husband must have removed the batteries, while I remained obliviously fast asleep, so that I could not have been woken by a noisy alarm going off. He really had thought everything through meticulously and thoroughly, although I did wonder if the accelerant he had used could be traced after a fire by an investigating officer, as that could have got him into grievous trouble, if indeed the authorities thought it was arson, because he would likely be a number 1 suspect. He had surreptitiously driven to the cottage, and when I retired to bed, had crawled through the window opening, and worked out where I slept, setting the couch alight, throwing accelerant over the corner of the ceiling, as my bedroom was on top of that space on the upper floor. He had done this for one reason alone, to ensure that I died in that inferno, so that I would never get half of the divorce settlement, as when he sent his idle threats to me in the post, he had meant business. If I was out of the way, he'd get it all. I knew what I needed to do. The following morning I phoned up my husband, and he was so surprised, because I could tell by the tone of his voice, which revealed he certainly did not expect to be hearing from me, because he thought I'd be dead.
"Fiona,"
he said, sounding aghast.
"What's this about? Why are you phoning me? Anything we have to say to each other, you know, is directly through our solicitors. I thought I made that very clear."
"Oh, I just called you, Gulliver, to let you know that when you crept into my cottage last night,
through the window that you happened to open, and the bar that you bent backwards, to set my couch alight in the living room, so that you could bring down the whole cottage in flames just to kill me. You left your very expensive glove behind. You know, the one I designed for you, that I purchased you in Switzerland. There isn't a glove like it anywhere else in the world. Strange that it was found at my cottage, don't you think? Especially since you've never been here before."
There was an uncomfortable, long, awkward silence at the end of the phone, and for a moment I thought that Gulliver had put it down. And then he piped,
"I don't know what you're talking about, Fee. You do speak such nonsense sometimes," he said defensively. "What fire are you talking about? You're making no sense at all."
"Cut the innocent out, Gulliver. Just so you know, I've written letters to people of prominence to keep in safety, that are to be opened should I die in unusual circumstances, so that the police will know that you are directly behind any suspicious death. I have the evidence in the glove you left behind, Gulliver, and you and I well know that there is unlikely to be any other glove in the world quite like this one. I know you were here last night. Deny it all you like, but I've even got a camera." The second part of my claim was of course an absolute lie, because I had no camera in the cottage, but it didn't hurt my husband to believe that I actually did.
"You have a camera?" he said, sounding horrified. "I'm sorry, Fiona. All right, please don't go to the police. I don't know what I was doing, but I did not want to kill you. I just wanted to scare you, that's all. It wasn't a big deal. You're overreacting as usual."
"Not a big deal? Are you kidding me, Gulliver? You could have killed me. From where I'm standing, it's a very big deal indeed. Unfortunately for you, your duplicitous plan went up in smoke, but you might have been under a cloud of suspicion if the fire was considered to be arson. But let's cut to the chase here. You wanted me dead, Gulliver. You know it, and I know it, so that you could get your grubby little hands onto all our assets. I should be going straight to the police. Any normal woman would be doing just that, and getting you arrested and locked away for good, because you know what? That's exactly what you deserve. But I'm a better person than you are, Gulliver. I'm also forgiving, and I don't hold on to my grievances. Don't you dare try the stupid stunt again, or you will go down for murder, and that's a promise."
"Fiona, I'm telling you, I started the fire so you would take me seriously about the divorce settlement. You're getting far too much. But I wasn't planning to kill you. That was the last thing on my mind. I knew you'd get out of the cottage in time."
"I'd love to believe you, Gulliver, but I don't. And what about the empty batteries in my smoke alarms? Those batteries were working perfectly, and now they're removed. Now try and explain that one to me. Just so you know, if you continue to contest the divorce settlement, I will go to the police, do you understand? So you better get onto your solicitors right away and sort this dreadful mess out, because I cannot get divorced from you fast enough." You may wonder why I didn't go to the police and get Gulliver arrested. I know I should, but I just couldn't do it. Even so, I'm not exactly sure why. I guess I'd been married to the man for so long that I didn't want him to be locked away indefinitely, although I agree he deserved it in every sense of the word. But he was still the father of my children, and I had been married to him for a long time. And even if things had not been rosy in the garden, we had a history together, and that counted for something as far as I was concerned. I'd never been the vengeful type, and despite what Gulliver did to me, I never hated him in the way he despised me, and I never could. Gulliver must have been very scared by my threat, worried that I might capriciously change my mind and go to the police and finally have him arrested, as later that day I got a call from a very confounded solicitor, affirming to me that my difficult, belligerent husband had finally agreed to all the settlements, which of course was a huge relief. It meant things would go through smoothly from now on. Furthermore, Gulliver sent someone to fix and repair up the damage in my cottage, to replace the ceilings and one of the walls, and of course the sofa. But I think that was done to cover his back, as he was running scared. I couldn't wait for the divorce to be finalized, and to put this wretched business all behind me. I wanted Gulliver out of my life for good, and Barbara, whoever she was welcome to him. The strangest thing of all is after I left my husband, I didn't go on a diet or exercise program, and yet the extra 40 pounds I had put on during the course of my marriage melted away like candle wax, without any effort on my part. How was it even possible? I hadn't even tried to consciously lose this weight, and yet it had slipped off me so effortlessly, like Cinderella's glass slipper. It was now that I was free to be myself, had let go of my inhibitions, insecurities, and with it the excess weight. For the first time the face that stared back at me in the bathroom mirror, that I could not bear to look at in the past, did not look so bad any more. I was beginning to like the new me, because I was more confident and assertive, and no longer the pushover I had been for so long. Later that morning, after the fiasco of the previous night, I could see a man in his 50s, not much older than myself, with a full head of grey hair, running up my driveway. He appeared to be out of breath and rather white in the face. He seemed disorientated and confused. I realized the stranger needed my help, but there was something distinctive about him that I appeared to recognize, like when I'd seen Heidi Esterhazing when she sashayed up to my front door, and I knew her from somewhere, but I didn't know where. I was getting the same impression from this man. The way he carried himself, those steely grey eyes that looked at me, the distinctive nose. But who was he? I was certain I'd met him. But I quickly persuaded myself the idea was simply ridiculous. The world wasn't this small, surely. Hugh Pearson's account.
It had been very dark, driving down some of those ambiguously obscure back-country roads, let me tell you. But I was in a very bad way. I had to get away, deep into the heart of the rolling countryside. I needed to get away from it all, and driving around at night seemed like a way to deal with the hopelessness that had been consuming me. For some reason, driving has always been tranquilizing for me. I'd never been bothered about driving at night, even in a place where there were no street lights on offer, and everything was covered in a velvety black veil. None of that ever bothered me. Perhaps even the tenebrific landscape in some way offered me solace. I can't be sure about that. Who knows? But getting into the heart of the countryside, far away from that horrible hospital, seemed like a very good idea to me. I was recklessly slamming my hands rather brutally on the steering wheel, so incredibly hard that I was doing myself some damage, but I didn't care. I was screaming, "It's not bloody fair, God! Why did you take Thomas away? What did he ever do to you? Why do you always go after the good people? Thomas was one of the nicest people you could ever hope to meet. But no, you decided to take him away. Why would you do this? Why not take someone else?" I was angry with God and the universe, even though I'd never been a man of faith. But it was good to put the blame on someone else, and God would do very nicely indeed. I screamed out a whole lot of obscenities into the night. I'm not proud of myself. I wasn't inclined to use bad language by any manner of means, but I was hemorrhaging swear words that were so vile they'd make a sailor blush. But I didn't care. Why should I care about anything any more? I had never really lost someone close to me. Both my parents were very much alive. Knowing I'd never see Thomas again was too much to bear for me. I almost felt like driving into a tree and being done with everything, so the pain would finally be gone. I cannot remember the last time I cried, but tears were pouring unabashedly down my cheeks, blurring my vision, as my rubber tires grazed the windy contours of the sequestered country roads. In truth, I had no way of knowing where on earth I was going. I had left my cell phone behind at the hospital, on the side table next to Thomas's bed. So unfortunately I had no GPS reception to help me navigate my way through this labyrinth of forested roads. Moments before I'd been in the hospital room talking and laughing with Thomas, as we knew he had about a week left to live. We wanted to make the most of the time he had left, but it had run out far too fast. No one had been expecting this to happen, There'd been no warning signs that you normally see in the dying process. When the person slips into oblivion, their skin goes blue, and their breathing begins to resemble a rattle. There'd been none of that. Thomas's skin had been pale, and he'd eaten a good dinner. He'd laughed at one of the pathetic jokes I had uttered. "You're funny, bro. You do know how to make me laugh, like no one else I know." He slurred his words and said something that was barely audible, and then he was gone, just like that. I'd screamed for the nurse. "Nurse! Nurse! Get here quickly! My friend's not breathing! Do something, for God's sake! Do something!" The nurse had rushed to Thomas's side, feeling for his pulse. "I'm sorry," she said, looking up at me, "but he's gone." "No!" I screamed. "No!" I threw my hands on top of my head. "No! You've got to do something! Get him back now! He's not supposed to go! Resuscitate him, for God's sake! Don't just stand there doing nothing!" "Sir, I know this is desperately upsetting, and I'm very, very sorry for your loss. But you need to calm down. Your friend was dying. You knew that. Everybody knew that here. I'm afraid resuscitation could never have worked on him. He's gone a few days prematurely, earlier than we expected, but he's gone. I know it's hard. Death is a part of life. It happens to us all at some point, but let me call someone to be with you. You're in a dreadful, dreadful state. It's not good for you to be on your own like this. I can send a counsellor to talk to you if you like. They can help talk to you, maybe prescribe some sedatives for you to help you manage your grief." "I don't want anyone, nor do I want anything, and I certainly don't need any sedatives. Leave me alone, will you? Stop being so damn nice, overly sweet, so syrupy. Don't you get it? My best friend was not supposed to die today. We were told he still had days to live. They lied to me. We were talking and then—" I know, said the nurse, nodding her head. She reached out to console me with a gentle hand, which I pushed away. "I know he wasn't expected to go right now," she said kindly. "There's normally a little advance warning, but sometimes it happens like that. The body doesn't always behave the way we expect. Sometimes it can take us off guard. But I think you were lucky, I really do. He died talking to you like that. Some people are in a coma when they pass. But you spoke to him till the very end. I mean, that's got to be a good thing, surely." "Lucky? How can you say I'm lucky? My best friend is dead. Do you even know what you're saying, woman?" "Sir, I know it's hard. I really do. I tell you what, let me get you a sweet drink from the dispenser. A can of sweet Coca-Cola, perhaps. It'll do you a great deal of good. You need the sugar, I'm sure, to give you energy." "I don't want anything to give me energy. And I don't need anything for energy. I have so much energy, in fact, that I could bring this whole hospital down. That's how mad I feel," I said, storming out of the hospital room like a rampaging rhino, while the nurse ran after me, her face contorted with concern. Sir, I just don't think you should go. Not like this. Not in this state. If you don't mind my saying so, you're not fit enough to drive in your condition. If you like, I can call a taxi for you to take you home, but I don't recommend you drive." "Leave me alone," I practically shrieked, barreling past her, blinded by my own tears. I barely remember getting into my truck, but I managed to do so. I kept driving and driving and driving. I didn't even know where I was going, but the driving was oddly soothing to me. It was good to focus on something else beyond my grief. I felt angry, so cheated. I was supposed to have a few more days with my friend, and that had been denied me. Of course, I had been prepared for his death. Thomas had been ill for 3 long years. I guess I was in denial. Even though he had been ill, we had thoroughly enjoyed many good times together, done so many things, ticked so many things off the bucket list. I suppose, despite everything, I persuaded myself that his death was never going to happen. The only person I was deluding was myself. I will never forget when Thomas was first diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. I was much more upset than he was. He took the very unkind revelations with a pinch of salt, as if it was no big deal, and I rarely admired him for his stoic courage. He approached his cancer with an extraordinary grace. Never once did he complain or feel sorry for himself, or even feel he'd been cheated. He was accepting from the very beginning. It all began when Thomas began to experience throbbing headaches, and moments when his vision became blurred and cloudy, so much so he could barely see anything at all. He would also experience frequent blackouts. His first port of call was to see an eye specialist, and from then on it spiraled down a rather unfortunate slippery slope. I remember when he called me to tell me that he had multiple malignant tumours in his brain and would require an operation and chemotherapy. I was devastated by the news. One of the tumours could have killed him in days had it not been removed. The treatments he received for his brain cancer prolonged his life to a degree. But one day over a pizza at a local restaurant, Thomas told me he was dying, and when he said that, I couldn't take another bite. My stomach was in knots. There's nothing they can do. The cancer is terminal. They say I've got a month to live. What? I said. That cannot be right. It can't be right. There has to be something they can do. Thomas reached out to me with a sobering hand. Look, bro, you've been like a brother to me. You're my very best friend. I know it's hard to hear my news, but I'm okay with it. Really I am. I'm just going on another intrepid journey. They say when you get to the other side, you never want to come back because it's so good. I've heard that, I admitted. They say they're colours you don't even get here, that everything is perfect. But I'm not ready for you to go, bro. There is still so much I hoped we could do together. The timing really sucks. It is a bummer. I know, said Thomas. But I'm at peace with it, bro. And you need to be too, for my sake at least. As I was driving somewhat precariously in my truck, deeper and deeper into the heart of the countryside, I was struck with the extreme unfairness of it all. Why was life so damn cruel? I hadn't prepared to lose my best friend this quickly. I thought I had a whole week left to enjoy his company before he breathed his very last. I felt that the universe had dealt me a double blow, and I was furious because I'd been cheated. If my friend had died when I expected him to go, that I could have coped with, but losing a few invaluable precious days that I expected to have made me furiously enraged. I hadn't even said a proper goodbye to Thomas, and now he was gone, having died prematurely, and was never coming back. We had been so close from when we were kids. We had lived in exactly the same street, done everything together. We got divorced at the same time, and that made our relationship stronger as friends. We had been bonded over our grief, of relationships that we could not save, like a drowning child that can't be revived. With a sudden abrupt surge of incorrigible anger, I promptly parked my car on the side of the sequestered road in the middle of nowhere, and got out, slamming the door behind me, charging towards the trees. It was a cool night. A wind blew briskly against my skin. I didn't have a flashlight with me, and if I had one, I would have not removed it from my car. I didn't care. I was flooded with the adrenaline of an all-consuming rage, and I had never been the type to get angry easily. So these raw, incongruous emotions I knew not how to handle, as they were so new to me. I did not know how to relieve myself of the tsunami of grief inside me that was burdening my heart and making my insides vacuously empty. I found a narrow footpath through the trees, and thankfully a magnanimous moonlight spilled through the branches, so I could see my way clearly down the trail. I thundered rather erratically down the footpath, rudely and rather brusquely stamping the ground like an insolent, precocious child having a hissy fit. I fiercely kicked the trunks of the trees, Some that reached out to scratch me with overhanging branches that I had failed to see, that knifed through my skin and drew blood. I never felt any pain, but embraced every scratch. It brought me relief, as I slammed my way through the grove, cursing under my breath, and spilling out a plethora of verbal diarrhea, as my anger was very, very out of control. Whether the trees were offended by me, I cannot be sure. All of a sudden, I became conspicuously well aware that I was almost certainly not alone in these woods, as dark as they were. Someone was watching me, and I had an audience. Then I saw her, and nothing prepared me for what I was seeing. She stopped ahead of me in the footpath, as if she had been expecting me. She was not remotely evasive, nor reticent, but commanding of my complete attention. If there was anything I do know for sure, she wanted me to see her, for she was no shrinking violet. She was confident and self-assured, standing up proudly with a lofty deportment, with a back as straight as a pencil, and a posture so graceful it took my breath away. I stopped short in my tracks. My mouth dropped open in astonishment. My body began to tremble and shake like a leaf. Nothing prepared me for what I was seeing. I had to be hallucinating, surely. My grief must be playing tricks with my mind. I knew, of course, that this was absolutely not the case. I was staring at a female Bigfoot. She might have been 8 foot tall, possibly more. But she was gargantuan in size, covered in long flowing dark hair. Of what exact colour I cannot be sure. And she had a face that reminded me of a high-ranking Indian warrior. Indeed, a headdress of eagle's feathers would have looked rather becoming on her human face, with its leathery skin and heavily frowned forehead. Her nose was flat, almost as if it had been squashed against a window pane. But her deep-set dark eyes were intelligent and bright, full of spirited energy. I should have been intimidated, lightly running away in terror, and if I'd had my wits about me, I would have done just that. But I didn't care about anything right now. The way I felt was that if the Bigfoot finished me off, she'd be doing me a favour. All well and good. Then I could join my friend in the hereafter. I found myself staring into the Bigfoot's mesmerizingly beautiful dark eyes. I was just drawn to them, in ways I cannot explain. I was struck with how incredibly kind they were. And what happened next was more bewildering than ever, because the Bigfoot spoke to me in my head, in a voice that was both kind and warm, almost angelic, you could say.
"You'll find your happiness again. Your friend is with you right now. He's telling me that he's sorry to have left so soon, but he will come and get you one day, when your time has come. He says to tell you that it's beautiful where he is."
I couldn't believe the Bigfoot was saying this to me, in some weird form of telepathic exchange. But I have no idea what happened after that, because later on I woke up in the woodgrove, lying under a tree, with the light of the new morning spilling through the branches. I sat up with quite the start, as you can imagine, feeling completely confused and disorientated. I mean, had I really slept in the woodgrove all night? It seemed nonsensical to me. What time was it? I could hear the tweets of the birds high up in the trees above my head, and I glanced around at the verdant foliage and undergrowth, and felt as if I was in a subterranean oasis. Everything was beautiful, of course. Then I remembered the Bigfoot I'd seen. Had I dreamt her? I wondered. It had felt so incredibly surreal. But when I looked down at the earthen pathway, I saw a huge imprint in the ground that confirmed to me that my encounter last night had not been fictitious. I wondered if the creature had left it there to affirm just that to me, in case I doubted my encounter with her. I reflected what she had told me, and that my friend Thomas had apologized for leaving early, and her words brought me immeasurable comfort. What I did not understand, however, was how or why I had clearly blacked out after my encounter with that Bigfoot. How had that happened? People didn't just pass out in the woods during the night, did they? I promptly got to my feet, brushing away the debris of grass and leaves off my clothes. Thank goodness it hadn't been too cold last night. It had been rather warm. Now I needed to find my car, but where on earth was it? I sashayed through the woodgrove and found the road where I'd parked it, but I realized it was gone. Where was it? It couldn't have just disappeared into thin air like this. Even though I had been in an angry stupor, I knew where I had parked it, and I'd parked it next to the tree with the burgeoning vines growing all over it, strangling it half to death. Let's just say it was nowhere to be found, so I knew I needed help, and I had no idea where I was going to find it, because I was in the middle of nowhere. There didn't seem to be any human habitation around. The nearest farmhouse could be miles away for all I knew. And that was when I noticed a tiny, narrow opening in the trees. And so I followed it, grateful to see that it led down some kind of driveway of sorts. I was relieved to see a distant, very beautiful-looking cottage overlooking a stream set up against a hilly backdrop. And as I ran up the path, a woman of around about my age was standing there looking at me. But then I recognized her at once. Oh, my God! I hadn't seen Fiona Edward Grant in what seemed like 100 years or so. She was the girl that got away when we left school, and I went away to college in Canada. After that, I never saw her again. But she'd been my first love. What were the chances of seeing her after all these years? And what was she doing here in Canada, more to the point? Was she married, I wondered? Would she even recognize me? Had I changed too much? My dark hair was now completely grey, that I would admit, and a lot thinner than it used to be. I had some fine lines creeping around my face, especially around the eye area. I stared at the woman, feeling a little flutter in my heart that I had not felt for a long, long time. Fiona came dashing towards me, obviously sensing my disorientation. I don't think she was too comfortable with the gog-eyed way I appeared to be looking at her. "Hello," she said in the voice that I'd always remembered from years before. That beautiful, beautiful voice that I knew I would never forget, especially when I heard it again. "Do you need any help? If you don't mind my saying, you look terribly confused. Are you lost or something?" I cleared my throat. I was a wee bit disappointed, I'm not going to deny that. Fiona obviously didn't recognize me at all. Had I changed so much, beyond all recognition? I probably had. "I know it sounds odd, really odd," I said to her, "but I've lost my car. I can't find it anywhere. I went for a walk in the woods, and when I returned to my car, it was gone, vanished into thin air just like that, and I know exactly where I parked it." "You've lost your car?" said Fiona, looking rather confounded. The puzzle lines on her forehead appeared to deepen. "How can you lose a car? It's a very big thing to lose, especially around here, when I imagined it would be quite conspicuous. Do you remember where you parked it? A lot of roads around here look similar, with all the trees around them. You could be slightly confused as to where you did actually park it." "I made sure when I parked it that I would know where it was. I parked it next to a tree that was being strangled by vines. But I don't know why I can't find it anywhere. I do not have a cell phone on me. I need to get a lift back to my house to call my neighbour, so I can come back with him and look for that car of mine. It has to be somewhere around here. It's chosen to do a vanishing act on me. Do you mind desperately if I use your phone?" "Of course I don't mind," said Fiona, smiling at me warmly. "You better come in. You poor thing. You must feel quite stranded out here." She paused for a moment and looked at me directly in my eyes. "I know this sounds crazy," she said to me, looking at me curiously again. "But you look rather familiar. Why do I feel like I know you from somewhere?"
Oh my goodness, I was thinking. Thank goodness she recognizes me, just a little. I think it's because you do know me, I announced. We went to high school together in Vermont. You're Fiona Edward Grant, are you not? You and I, we were together at one point. Besides, I never forget a pretty face, especially not yours. I recognized you at once.
Oh my God, it is you, said Fiona, gasping. Hugh Pearson! I'd never believe that in a month of Sundays, but it's you! I knew you.
Well, it's me, I said, giving her a wicked grin. I've thought of you a lot over the years, Fiona. You were the girl that got away. You're not married, are you? I asked, holding my breath. This woman was so beautiful. Could I dare to hope that she was not married? Women like her had to be saddled with a husband and kids. Her being single, no, that would be too good to be true.
I am married, as it happens. My surname's Von Rennan now.
Oh, I see, I said, feeling disappointment rising up in me. So you're living here in Canada with your husband, in this beautiful cottage. What brings you to Canada of all places? I know you have Canadian heritage, but I never thought you'd live out here.
My divorce, said Fiona.
The words were like music to my ears. I tried to sound sympathetic, even though I wanted to scream to the rooftops with delight. Inwardly I was going, yes, yes, yes. The one that got away is getting divorced.
And you?
Asked Fiona.
Are you married?
I'm unfortunately not. I got divorced about 7 years ago. It was terribly messy. A very unfortunate business, but it is what it is.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's a bummer. I know, because I'm going through a divorce now.
Do you mind dreadfully telling me why you're getting divorced? Or just tell me to mind my own business? I asked coyly. Fiona shrugged her shoulders nonchalantly. You know. According to my husband, I'm boring, ugly, fat, stupid, the whole thing. At that, I cracked up laughing.
What's so funny?
I'm laughing because your soon-to-be ex-husband is a complete idiot. You're the most beautiful woman in the entire world as far as I'm concerned. I've thought about you a lot over the years, and I thought, why did I ever let that girl slip through my fingers like grease? And now here you are.
A little battle-weary, perhaps, and certainly older. But yes, here I am.
All of a sudden, I was staring at Fiona's carport, my mouth dropping open in astonishment.
What's wrong?
Asked Fiona.
You look like you've seen a ghost.
Well, I think I might just have. What on earth is my Jeep Wrangler doing under that tree over there? Fiona swiveled her gaze towards the tree, and she looked very surprised when she saw my vehicle parked underneath it.
What the hell? What is that doing there? This is not what you think. I'm not in the habit of stealing people's cars.
We both walked side by side to my Jeep, and in the front seat of my car were my keys, a collection of small stones. And then I knew exactly who'd brought the car here. It must have been the female Bigfoot, because she was so big she could have carried anything. Was she trying to play matchmaker, I wondered? And what a matchmaker she was! Fiona was the perfect woman. She ticked all the right boxes for me. And what were the chances of running into her again after all these years? It was a miracle of note, that was for sure, and I wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth. 2 years later, I'm holding my new wife's hand in a supermarket in Vermont. I'd never been happier, of course. I got married to the girl that got away. I missed Thomas, of course I did. But I had found a new best friend in Fiona. We had come to Vermont together to visit my parents who lived here. Fiona was looking at the vegetables. She wanted to cook my parents a casserole for dinner. All of a sudden a man walked over towards us, with a gaping mouth. I realized he was looking at my wife with an incredulous expression on his face, as if he'd seen a ghost. My wife's face went completely white.
Hello, Gulliver. Fancy seeing you here. How are you doing? Long time no see.
More to the point, what are you doing here in Vermont? I thought you were in Canada. Fiona pointed to me.
This is my husband Hugh, she said.
Pleased to meet you, said Gulliver, shaking my hand rather icily, and practically glaring at me in the process. He wasn't pleased to see me at all.
Well, we're here to see Hugh's parents. You see, Hugh grew up in Vermont. We were at high school together. I seem to remember telling you he was my first love. We're back together again. You know, we got married and everything.
So you rekindled your friendship, did you? Said Gulliver sarcastically. How very cosy. You're looking very good these days, Fiona. You've lost all the weight. Your hair's very nice. Your dress pretty. Seems to me your standards have gone up in the world.
That's nice of you to say, Gulliver, said Fiona. I'll take that as a compliment. How's your relationship with Barbara Flores these days? Did the two of you get married?
No, we didn't get married, said Gulliver. And I'm very glad about that too. Awful girl she was. Can you believe it? She says I was too old for her. But then again, she was so callow, so damn babyish, always whining about this and that. I'm glad we never tied the knot. It would never have worked.
I'm sorry to hear that, Gulliver. That is a bit disappointing.
Well, I better be going, said Gulliver, grumbling under his breath. Good to see you, Fiona. Once he was gone, Fiona looked at me sadly.
He looks like a lonely, miserable old man. And he didn't even ask about the children. You'd think he'd want to know about his own kids. He's cut himself off from everyone. I feel sorry for him, I really do. He looks such a mess.
Well, sorry, love, but he got what he deserved, I said, kissing my beautiful wife on the cheek. I'm the one that won the gold, because I've got you.
So there you are. That's my story. What an incredible story. And wow, so many dimensions to it. I mean, who would have thought those two would get together? Wasn't it wonderful that a woman who was treated so badly by her husband, had such a miserable time with him, put up with him for so long, ends up meeting her first love again in such idiosyncratic circumstances that you never saw coming, and having an encounter with a Bigfoot that brought those two together in some way? There was definitely some dynamics going on there that are beyond our comprehension. What an extraordinary story. And wow, what a lovely story. I don't know what to say. Until next time, goodbye and good night.